What's up, gentlemen? I'm Kit Simi, and today I've got 5 Djent guitar mixing and production tips for you. If you like this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment with which of these tips helped you the most. Check out my Fiverr. I've got low prices right now, so if you or your band needs any tracks mixed or mastered, make sure to hit me up while those prices are as low as they are. Let's get started. Alright, first things first, let's talk about amp sims. I'm going to go ahead and recommend 2 free amp sims and 1 paid amp sim that I think is well worth the money. The 2 free ones are going to be Nalix Ninja, which is super sick, and the Lapua Legion plugin. I'm going to go ahead and plug Red Tone by Vadim Taranov. It's only $14 and it is unreal. It is the only amp sim I pretty much use anymore. Except for Ninja, and I'll talk about that one later. Next to your impulse responses, amp sims are going to be probably the next biggest factor in your tone. Like real amps, every amp responds differently to different amounts of gain and harmonic content. This is what Red Tone looks like. Let's take a look here. It's really good. Take a listen. Let me go ahead and turn these off. Sounds really good. Let's go ahead and give Ninja a try on this track. Ninja, I think, is built to not have to use a tube screamer behind it, so it has a lot of gain. I already have one, though. We're going to keep it on and just turn the gain way down. Let's hear it. Pretty gnarly, very rich. All right, now let's take a listen to Lapua Legion. Let me make sure stereo is on. Quality is set to high. Nice, that sounds great too. Let's go ahead and, just so you can see from scratch, give those 2 a shootout with Red Tone here. Maybe it's just me, but Red Tone seems to win every time. For only $14, I think it's so worth the money. All right, number 2. Let's talk about your signal chain and your IR. The basic signal chain for a Djent guitar is a noise gate, an overdrive, into your amp, into some cab, usually something with V30s or, some Mesa Boogie oversized 4x12 cabinet. And then maybe into more compression, EQ, all that kind of good stuff. So I use THU. For my effects a lot of the times. My basic is just the gate expander into the Tube 9, which is obviously based off the TS9 overdrive. Normal overdrive setting for most every Djent guitarist is to have the drive all the way down, tone all the way up, and the level all the way up. The reason you're going to do this is because you're not really looking to get much saturation or distortion out of the tube screamer. You're really just boosting the clean level into the amp, so that the amp's gain stages give it a lot more saturation, especially where Djent tends to be a very mid-focused genre. The TS808 or the TS9 tend to have a mid boost, which sounds really good going into most high gain amps. The reason you want to have your tone all the way up too is because Tone circuits, most of the time, just act like a low-pass filter. And if you're not boosting your highs, or even worse, if you're cutting your highs before you go into the amp, that low mid is going to be extremely present, and low mid tends to be called mud for a reason. It's a really ugly frequency band that you usually don't want to be very pronounced. So you want to make sure you're not cutting, or even better, you're boosting the highs going into your amp if you have a low tuned guitar. If it's too bright at the amp stage, you can turn your treble down at the amp, but you don't want to do that beforehand. Let's talk about your IRs now. Now, the one IR that I'm going to suggest all of you have in your toolbox is the ML Sound Lab's best IR in the world. It is free, and I use it on almost every project at this point. It must already be EQ'd or processed in some way, like it's not just a raw cab impulse, because it just sounds so good and it fits so well in your mix. It has a really nice booming bottom end, but it's not muddy, and the highs are very pronounced, but they're not shrill, and that's so important. Go ahead and get this. It's so good. Other than that, sometimes amp sims you get will come with IRs. Sometimes they're not great. Sometimes they are. I know Ownhammer makes really good IRs. I would suggest them. But the ML Sound Labs IRs are really good. They have packs all the time for different holidays and different special events. I got the Halloween 2 cab pack, and I love it. Let's go ahead and shoot out some of these other cabs. That's Djent green on both. Let's try, assuming OS means oversized, like a Mesa oversized. Now, a couple tips here. Having multiple IRs that you like is really handy, because you can put a different IR on both the right and the left, and that will lend itself to perceived stereo width as well. So if you have two IRs that are somewhat similar but at least different enough, you will make your guitar sound a lot wider. I prefer to stick with one, but what I do is I high pass them differently. You'll see on the left here I have it high passed at 116, and then on the right I have it at 123. It's a very little thing, but it does give it like a wider feeling stereo image on the low end, which I think works really well in the genre. All right, let's get into something that changed my guitar production forever. Multiband compression. What multiband compression is I'm going to go ahead and assume you all have at least a very basic idea of what compression is. Multiband, especially Pro MB here by FabFilter, lets you choose your own frequency bands and allows you to compress them differently. If your guitar has a lot of like boomy low end to it, but you don't want to cut out the bass, what you could do instead is you could compress it with a fast attack and a slow release and allow a really quick transient of low end, but then it'll smush it down so that it's not taking over your tone every time you hit a low note. I'm going to go ahead and just turn this on while it's playing and let you hear what it's doing. Makes a hell of a lot of difference. Same basic concept with Pro Q here. Pro Q3 lets you set your EQ to a dynamic mode that'll respond relative to the amplitude of the frequencies that are coming into it. Instead here, I'm just using it to boost the lows and the subs a little bit. Not enough to really compete with the bass, but just enough to give it some more body. I'm cutting out low mids, boosting some true mids, little boost around the 1 to 2K area, and then pretty flat around the treble. Let's go ahead and turn that on and hear what that sounds like. All right, next up, let's talk about quad tracking. So everybody probably already knows that double tracking is the standard in most guitar genres, where you record twice and you pan each track hard left and hard right, running through the same tone. Now, quad tracking is doing that again, and the way I interpret it is doing another hard left to hard right with a different tone, but shaping your tones to fill in each other's cracks. So if you have one tone with one amp you like, but it just doesn't have enough of something, it doesn't have enough high end, or it's too bassy, then you can have another tone. You're going to track 4 times, 2 pairs in 2 different tones, and they're both going to complement each other. Usually you're going to keep the second tone a little bit lower, just enough to make them sound like one instrument and that they're filling out their own frequency range. So I've already walked through my tone on this first amp with red tone. Now this second amp, I'm actually using Ninja on it. And for the IRs, I'm using the Panda Cab's free cab pack too, and the Djent cab on it. That should be free as well. You should really get those. They have bass cabs too, which sound really good. You can see I have some EQ, I have some Ninja, my IRs, more EQ, compression, same Pro Q, same multiband, literally the same presets I saved for both of these. Let me turn that on halfway through and let you hear what that does to the tone. You hear it just gives it more bass punch, more mid presence, more top end sizzle, but not enough to make the tone sound shrill. One thing I suggest is when you have multiple guitar tracks like this, like I have 2 amps, I have a lead and I have a clean, I send them all to one guitar bus with a compressor on it, and this keeps everything from poking out of the mix too much and kind of lets everything kind of sit together almost like they're in the same room. It makes everything sound much more cohesive. All right, so this does not go directly to guitar, but let's talk about bass and how that influences your guitar tone. So one of the biggest rules of Djent is to have a split tone bass that plays in unison with your guitars. It doesn't always have to, but it makes for really good accents for breakdowns or chorus or certain sections where you really want this one full guitar sound. Let me take a look at what I've got going on for my bass right here. Nice. All right, so I have some serial compression going on into FabFilter Saturn. So most people who do the Djent grindy bass tone split it into 2 or 3 separate tracks with crossovers that allow them to manage the low end specifically on one track with a lot of compression, just the low end, just the bass, anything from like 150 to 200 hertz down. And then one track with the high end that they distort the hell out of, EQ, compress, and then send them back into a bus. Sometimes they'll also have a third track that has a normal Ampeg bass tone, and then they'll blend them all to taste. Instead, what I do here, and I learned this from watching a video of Nolly on ZURM or something, talking about how he does his. FabFilter Saturn is a multi-band distortion plugin, so you can select your own bands and then distort all of them differently, use different models of distortion or tape or tube and saturation and all that kind of stuff. And so instead of splitting my bass out into multiple tracks, what I've opted to do is to have a crossover around 215, 216 hertz right here. Leave the low end alone. It's actually just on its default setting right now. I don't mind a tiny little bit of saturation on it. And then have the lead amp setting going pretty high, about 75% here on 216 and above. And that is all going into an IR loader here using the Panda Cab's free pack. They have the bass amps or bass cabs that I was talking about, and this is called the Satan tone. So let me go ahead and just walk through my chains so you can hear what everything does as it goes. All right, got the API coming in here to do some EQing. You can see that before it hits anything, it's boosting a hell of a lot of 10K. Nothing going on here in the mids. Boosting 4 dB at 100. And that is it. Yep. That's going into an 1176 model here. You can see I have it set to take off like a max of -7 dBs at a ratio of 8:1. Pretty fast release. Yeah, pretty fast release. Slower attack, still pretty fast on the 76s. That's going into Saturn. You hear how nasty that high end is, but the IRs take care of that. I'm not actually using this. I was just comparing what these two different IRs sound like. This is THU, and they have this bass Ashes 4x12 cab that I like to experiment with sometimes. So let's compare. I like the nattier, the Satan tone better. I really like software that lets you position your own mics on a cab, but to be honest, it's not my strongest skill, so I prefer IRs that are already kind of set. I don't really have to mess with it too much. Someday I'll get good at that. All right, this is all going into an EQ here, leaving the bass alone because it's already present enough. Cutting out some low mids, those are the enemies of your bass, really anything. Boosting around the 1.5K, and that's about it on the EQ. And once again, going into multiband compression, my new favorite tool. Compression, a little bit of compression on the low end here, adding 6 dB again, but compressing it with a relatively fast attack and release, cutting low mid, boosting mids, higher mids, and keeping the treble pretty much the same. Nice, sounds great. All right, so what you're gonna want to do once you have your amp tone set up is you're gonna want to cut the fader all the way down. You're gonna start playing your guitar tracks, and then you're gonna start sneaking it up until it's there to taste. You really want it to complement the guitars, but not to kind of like force its way through the mix. I mean, if you want your bass to be present, you really want to have, sections for it. You don't want it to like fight with the guitars necessarily. So let's go ahead and start mixing the bass into our guitars. That sounds great to me. Let me let you hear. I'm going to turn the bass on and off so that you can hear just how much it adds to the guitars. Although in the genre it tends to kind of hang out in the background, it's incredible just how much the bass adds to these productions. And having a solid bass tone adds a lot to your guitars. All right, that was 5 Djent guitars, mixing and production tips and tricks, but I've got one more bonus tip for you since you stayed this long. Let's go ahead and talk about EQing before you go into any effects, any distortion, anything. And basically what this is doing is you're adjusting your guitar's your guitar's pickup response before it goes into anything. So if you have a guitar and you're like, oh man, these pickups suck, I can't get a good sound out of it, it's too bassy, it's too muddy, it's too shrill or whatever, try running some EQ before you go into anything, because it could save you a lot of headache. Yes, the long-term best option is to get pickups that suit your style, but if you're like me and you're on a budget and you have one of the cheapest first 8-string models to come out, this is the Ibanez RG8. It is like the basic 8-string. I've had it for like 8 years now, and I've got a pair of Alumatomes in it, which are not the most expensive. They're not the best pickups in the world. I love this instrument. I'm not saying anything bad about this instrument, but it doesn't always do what I need it to. So instead, if I'm having trouble building tone, like this tends to be a very muddy sound to it and not enough mid, I'm going to cut the mud and I'm going to boost the mid before I even go into my gate or my overdrive or anything like that. And that really, you know, it's not going to make this like standout difference that you're always going to be conscious of, like, but when you're playing it, you're going to feel the difference and you're going to reduce a lot of headache further down the processing in your tone if you're able to kind of shape your guitar like going in. You know, it's they say you can't polish a turd. You want to get the best recording possible. You want to get the best source possible, and this really helps with that. So you see, I actually have 2 of these. I have one of these going in, and then I have my overdrive, and then I have one of these coming in before my amp. So let's talk about this one because it's a little bit more drastic. I'm using an 8-string, and I figured out, okay, I know what key the song is in. I know more so what tuning I'm in. So whatever that bottom string is at, look up the frequency to note conversion. Figure out what frequency your bottom string resonates at, because that's going to be the lowest your guitar is going to hit, and then cut out anything below that. Make sure that the fundamental or the formant, the first harmonic, is maintained, but anything below that is just eating up headroom and adding mud. You don't need it. So I figured out that the fundamental of my guitar, of the bottom string of my guitar, was right here, right around 70 to 100 hertz. So I cut out anything below that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn these on and let you hear what it does to the tone. I'm going to solo this first. I hope you can hear just how much that tightens up the tone. I mean, it's so subtle, but it does so much. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. I'm Katsumi again. If you like, please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment and tell me which tip helped you the most and which one you're going to use in your productions from now on. Please check out my Fiverr. I would love to mix and master your projects. I'll see you guys soon. Thank you all.